away.
Yep.
Yeah, in that one too. Look at me go.
Yeah, see? We could do a whole mini season on horror films Emily has actually seen before the podcast. Hello, horror fans and nerds and buffs and everybody. You are watching or listening to Horror Nerds at Church, which is a very ridiculously queer podcast where we take a deep dive into a horror film and talk about how it connects to queerness, religion, and theology. We are, in fact, so queer of a podcast that as we are just about to go live, Emily was voguing at the camera. Um,
You're
my
telling my
name
secrets.
my name is Pace Warfield, and I am the weird little stick figures in the hanging in the trees.
And I'm Pastor Emily, and I am the creek that gets crossed and crossed and crossed a lot.
You have to say it like you're in Burkittsville, though. You're the crick that gets crossed a lot, a lot,
Oh,
a
I
lot.
can't. I can't. I know that I live in Maryland, but like, crick.
Yeah, it's a word out there.
It's the crick.
And also,
I am Susanna, and I am a map who is always lost. That is,
that's also very ADHD vibes. I love it.
yeah, big time. That was just what I was going for. Thank you.
I love it. Follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/horror nerds at church. It starts at only $5 to sign up, which is much cheaper than a map these days, I'm assuming. Dropping this month on Patreon, you get our Matilda movie commentary, which dropped today as of the live recording, which is on a Tuesday. And you get our The Witches horror buff episode and our Blue Tube episode, which will happen once I get the guts to try again with American Horror Story because it was scary. And you'll get to hear all about it. Also,
Yay!
also check out our show notes for any content warnings and links to stuff for this episode for those of you listening later on.
Yeah. Um, the stuff we put in the show notes includes links to all the books we talk about, like books at bookshop.org, as well as Emily said, content warnings, links to our newsletter, merch store, Patreon, so much stuff. So check that out. Um, so we're going to be talking about the movie The Blair Witch Project. But before we do that, how has everyone been in the past 2 weeks since we went live with Suspiria?
I got a haircut. I decided to give up some of my hair for Lent. Got it cut on Ash Wednesday.
Like it, I like it.
Um, yeah, yeah. Life has been overwhelming.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, we've had some emergency nobody asks Emily for anything days that have gone to varying degrees successfully. I have to get a new car
That
because my
sucks.
car needs like $5,000 in repairs. And is 12 years old and a Ford. And I just found out slash realized, thank you, Facebook, somebody's Facebook post, about 5 years ago this week, everything was shutting down for COVID. So, happy trauma anniversary to the world. Well, the non-New York, California world, because they were a little bit before that. But, yeah, was not ready for that to all of a sudden be here. 5 years of pandemics, and the same person is president,
Hmm.
and yeah, making a shit show of it. On the plus side, I will save that tea for our Patreon episode. But
Okay, cool.
I have been reading a bunch. So
Yay.
I finished Bitter Blue, which is the third in the Gracing novels series, and I'm not going to read the rest of them because the first one's my favorite, Gracing, but the first three are my big favorites. So I don't feel the need to finish the series. Don't poke me about that because I have some OCD that will make me change my mind. Um, but then I read Galaxy, the Prettiest Star, which is a
Mm.
graphic novel, and it's really cute. And it's like transy. It's a transy graphic novel with like good representation and disability and um, diverse characters, and it was just a really cute read. So I read that in the last 24 hours. Thanks, Hoopla, which is a gift from my public library, Enoch Pratt. Woo woo. And then I picked up from Enoch Pratt. Yes, that's right. It's the Graceling book, but it's the graphic novel version.
Ooh, fancy.
So I started reading that. Um, and then the next one that I'm like really, really reading is going to be this book, also by Kristen Kishore, who's the author of Gracing. There is a door in this darkness, which she wrote while having like brain surgery and the pandemic and like the height of COVID stuff. Um, so I'm really excited to read that book by her. And I finally got the Passing Playbook back on my audio books from Libby. Because there's like a 25-week wait. So I listened to half of it and then I didn't finish. And so I finished it. And it's a really cute audiobook and it's a YA trans queer romance soccer book. It's cute. I really liked it. Highly recommend. Um, yeah, that's what I've been reading and playing on my new Switch, which is not actually that new, but I've been playing on it more.
Which is fun. I keep saying that River, you and I need to do Mario Party sometime. It would be so fun.
We definitely do. We need to be friends on Switch. I only have one friend on Switch right now, and it's River. I have others. There's a 6-year old, almost 7-year old, that I need to just get the things and then we'll be friends. And we can do, I don't know what she likes to play. I do. I have a list.
I love
My
it.
own, like, one of the things. Yeah. Anyway. Um, yeah, so life has been overwhelming.
LOL sob, as they say.
Hmm. Also, I donated to the vampires today. So I can find out what's going on with my blood. Just kidding, I just got blood tests. So I had a blood draw. It's not really going to vampires, don't worry.
I mean, we haven't. No, we watched Blade 2 as a movie commentary, I think, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because there's that whole scene about the blood bank where the vampires are using that. It's a front for vampires.
I'm
So we
just,
don't know what's happening in behind the scenes there for from blood draws.
yeah. Anyway, what about you two?
Hmm. Okay. I still haven't been reading much. Just not. It's weird. Like I feel like Emily and I are in a seesaw here. Whenever I'm not in a reading place, Emily's like able to read a lot, and then vice versa, which is cool. I'm cool with trading off like that. But I've been listening to some podcasts. Still listening through the back catalog of Morbid and through Tooth and Claw. They're really fun. And but mostly I've been doing watching a lot of movies. So in theaters since last time I saw Riff Raff, which is kind of a weird action-y movie slash comedy. It's funny, it's fine, it's good. Um, I also saw Mickey 17, which is a sci-fi comedy, and it stars Robert Pattinson in a role very different from Edward Cullen. Um, but
Somebody was talking
he
about it
he
on
does very good.
NPR, I think, and I was like, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it was a decent movie. So that was fun. And then I also watched at home for the first time Swallow, which is a movie which is kind of like a body horror movie slash real life, like reflection on sexism in real life about this woman who is kind of trapped in a marriage and is pregnant and not really looking forward to it, but feels like she has to for her husband. And she develops pica, and it kind of follows that journey in a really body horror way. But it has a ending that it has some good endings. So that was nice at least that it ended on a high note. Um and it is pro-choice, which I love when a movie's pro-choice. There are far too few of them. Um Sorry, that was a little bit of a spoiler for that movie in case I think I put two and two together. But today is kind of a crappy day for me because of reasons that Emily was saying and other reasons and just life and all that. But I got home to mail. It was a big Blu-ray 4K mail day for me. But as I talked about on the podcast before, I tend to use most of my mad spending money I have, which isn't that much, and any kind of Amazon gift cards and stuff like that for uh 4K movies. So I in the mail just today I got Orca the Killer Whale, which we might cover this summer. Emily and I are
Oh
scheming
yeah.
about a potential summer mini season. Um, but it has orcas, and I know Emily loves orcas. And it also has Richard Harris, which played Dumbledore. I don't remember if he was the first or second Dumbledore, but he's one of the two Dumbledores. Um, a very young Richard Harris.
I think it was the
Uh,
first.
then I got Talk to Me, great movie, was really buzzy movie. Blackula, the first and second, and then Kong Skull Island, so I can continue my Godzilla Legendary Verse watch through. So big day in movie world for Pace.
Indeed.
And speaking of things that this is an auspicious anniversary of coming up, March 25th will be Horror Nerds at Church's fourth birthday.
Woohoo!
It'll be it's last year of preschool before starting kindergarten.
Woo!
And
So
it only
basically,
took us 7 seasons.
right? But like
The
for
seasons were not the same as yours. Yeah, you.
when Pace was this old, about four going on five, well, when I was four, probably not as much. Horror Nerds at Church, I can say, has officially covered more horror movies than I have seen when I was this old, but not by much.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Mm.
What about you, Susanna? How have you been? What have you been watching? All that fun stuff.
Like when Emily was talking about the anniversaries, I just realized what my problem was. So I watched a whole lot of news for like a week ago, like a whole lot of news, and I was like and I've been overstimulated by the news and freaked
Mm-hmm.
out in a way that I'm not usually freaked out. As a former like grassroots coordinator, and like you 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 get when you have to run like hundreds of thousands of people in 8 hours, it takes to get them to vote. It takes a lot to like freak you out, and I was trying to understand why I was so freaked out this week, and it wasn't until Emily was talking about the anniversaries that I get it. All I knew is that the news was bothering me. What
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
is actually because my mom, who died um like 2 years ago this month, well, last month, but we had yeah, last month, like I've just passed that
Two
anniversary.
years ago. Yeah.
2 years ago, and but my mom was a federal worker like her whole life, and we were
Mm-hmm.
the family of federal workers my whole life. My mom, when she passed, she had retired after 30 years in the government. She worked for the Department of Defense as a civilian. She is exactly all of the people who are getting fired. Um, My mother was one of the first female computer programmers in the army. She worked on. She couldn't tell me a lot about what she did. It was actually classified. It wasn't like, espionage or anything. But she was one of those people that would have made, that we would have been a rich family if she would have not worked in the government. She would have if she were doing it in private industry. But because she was the child of a mechanic and had her own poverty trauma, the idea of working in an industry that wasn't as solid as the government really freaked her out. Like, she worked in that job in the government despite the pay cut it took because she needed security, because she had two parents that she was supporting, a brother who had a severely autistic child, and also two kids, all on her own, all on her salary. And so the idea of like working in any industry where she wasn't guaranteed a job freaked her out. So what she did by the time she retired, she worked for the Department of Defense, and she was the chair of. So like when a private company wants to get a contract with the government, they put in a bid on something that they put out. Like there's it starts with an F. There's I don't know. The government is all acronyms. She used to joke that she was going to quit and write the letter entirely about acronym, and I was going to be like, "Dear SOBs, I am AWOL and you are SOL. TTY." She thought that was hysterical, but so like when people put out, when the government needs like software done, when the army needs software done, they put out request for proposal. That's what it is. RFP, request for proposal. And then private industry comes back with all these proposals, and then there's a committee that meets and weighs them all, and then there's a chair who oversees it. And she did that for the army as a woman.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And it just dawned on me what I've been freaking out about. It's because we were a government family. I guess she made I think she made $100K by the time she retired, barely $100K, which wasn't a whole lot for like a family of 6. When 2 of them were children and 2 of them were seniors, and so like it didn't
primarily a single family income too.
Yeah, on a single one income, I just realized how my life would this is actually really traumatizing to me as a child of a federal worker whose mom just died, because that life, that security was something that we relied on our whole lives. Like, she talked about it all the time, how much money she could make in private industry if she wasn't, so obsessed with making sure that there was a roof over our heads. And she was the first person in my family to go to college. And if she had been born a little bit later, then she would have probably been one of the first fired, because she was a woman, she was in a power of authority, and she had a lot of knowledge, and they could kind of force retirement on her. And all these things that I'm watching are freaking me out, because I heard so many stories about incompetence in the government, like so many stories about incompetence, and this blows them all away. Like, crazy stories. Like, this one time, she had this best friend at work whose daughter worked at Busch Gardens. And she came into work. Her daughter came to visit her at work, and she had a green sticker with the letters BG on it. And she got a fucking, 10 gun salute coming through the gateway because they thought it meant Brigadier General. This is that Fort Hood here. So, there's just not, they just do whatever they're supposed to do, they just do it, and they don't think twice. Okay, if you see BG on a sticker, even if it's an old beat up car with a teenager driving it, you give a brigadier salute, general, and so I'm terrified of what they're doing. And now I realize that that's what my problem was, because I spent the last week in a video game, entirely in a video game, literally like a simulation game where you like terraform a planet, and like that is all I've been capable of. And now I'm ready to get back out, but I'm sorry to do my therapy on your podcast right now. But it wasn't until Emily talked about the
Yeah,
trauma anniversary that I really, oh yeah, it's because my mom died. Oh wait, no, it's because my mom was a government worker, and
yeah,
I've
that's
been hearing
legit.
government worker stories my whole life.
Yep. I in a very similar place too. Like I have many friends who work in the federal government, work in DC. I was My stepfather also worked for the Department of Defense, and so like my blended family on my mom and stepfather's side was very much a federal working family as well. So yeah, all that's resonating. And also that was but two questions. First is what video game is the one where you're terraforming entire planets? That sounds really fun.
Okay, so it's a really great game by a really great human called Terra Genesis, and it's a fantastic Android game.
Yes.
But then he sold it because he came on really hard times with COVID, twins, and his mom getting sick all at the same time. And so he sold it. So like the game is still a good game, but the ads that are
Mhm.
in the game are just like incredibly like misogynist. Like there's a lot of
Ooh,
like,
yeah.
so I'm really sad about it because I can no longer recommend it to children because the game itself is amazing, but the ad company that the current owner like contracts with, it's just a nightmare. So and so you can pay to get rid of ads, but it's like $6 a week because
And
the ads
also
are so
then
much.
you're
What?
paying and also then you're paying the company that's doing crappy sexist stuff.
Right. So I mean, I know I really love the game though. It's a fantastic game. You get a planet. The way the guy made it is that like you get a planet and he uses real science. It's a game of real science. So
That's really
there's
cool.
like temperature, pressure, oxygen, and water, and you have to mitigate those four factors. You can increase them or you can decrease them, and you do that via these facilities or scientific technologies that we either do have or we are hypothesizing that we will have. And but the one deals with the other. So it's a great ADHD game. Like if I have too much water on the planet and I want to use an ice launcher to get rid of the water, it is great because it also brings in income because it's a spectator event, but it also like raises the pressure on the planet. So I can't. So I have to have another facility that deals with pressure, but that might raise the oxygen. So like
Yeah.
you have to have your fingers in all of those pies, and there's like three different facilities to increase and three different facilities to decrease for each of water, temperature, oxygen, and pressure. And then on top of that, you sometimes have a planet that's big enough to have like satellites, and if it's a planet that's in our solar system that we know, they're using actual NASA scans. So if you like terraform this planet, you will see what Mars looks like, which by the way, looks like one half of the planet is land and one half of the planet is ocean with like two pimples peeping through because the planet is really weirdly actually shaped like that. It's sea level.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you have to mine for resources. So you have to do
Cool.
that.
Tell them about the genetic place.
And okay, so after you get the water and the oxygen and the temperature and everything to the level that can support life, then you can create aquatic or terrestrial species. And you have to start first with microbes, and then you have like a larger an herbivore over that will eat the microbes, or and then you have like a carnivore over that will eat the herbivores, and that's for aquatic and for terrestrial. And you can actually like determine the gene. So like you can have like a microbe that is like really really large, so it provides a whole lot of support for the things that eat it, like, or a microbe that is an extremophile, but extremophiles, that can survive in extreme environments don't have a very high birth rate, so they don't provide a lot of support for the animal on top of it. And if you have a really bad like if you don't have an extremophile or you have something that's like adapted for cold and it's suddenly warm because you didn't pay attention to the pressure gauges of your facility, then that animal's going to die off a little bit. And so like you have all of these like spinning plates all at the same time. It's great for ADHD people who have the ability to see a really big huge picture and have to pop in there and do details really fast. Like, so it's been worth the $6. I paid the $6 for 1 week so that I could just have a break from the ads because they were really misogynist and they got in my head
Yeah.
about weight and whether or
No,
not
the
you're pretty
genetic
enough.
park. The genetic park.
Oh yeah,
Tell them about the genetic park.
at one point a pop-up comes up and says we've created a genetic part in this particular town, and we're using creatures from fantasy and we're using creatures from mythology, and it's a big hit and you're bringing in this much income on it, and we expect absolutely nothing to go wrong. And I was like, that is really... So it's little things like that, and it also pops up like when like a dialect becomes its own separate language, when so you see the civilization you can play, and I love the governors. Like you have governors and each one has their own specialty, like for your towns, like pressure, temperature, whatever, but they're very diverse. And like this would be so great for kids. They learn about the planet, they learn how fragile an ecosystem is, they learn about basic biology and the way that genes determine how you affect an environment or how pollution can affect the environment. And then each governor has like a backstory, like, and they're all very diverse, of different races, of different ages, of different ethnicities, and you see every type
including
of human.
Disabilities. It doesn't erase disabilities.
It doesn't. Like
the
the woman who is like the best like birth like child mortality doctor, so she increases a birth rate basically, is like in a wheelchair, and she's very regal, and it's really fantastic. Like I love the one picture of, there's this one guy that he looks Sikh and he has the turban, and it's written underneath of it that he like developed sky farm technology that allowed us to feed billions and billions of people by having the farms in orbit. And he looks Sikh, and you don't think, like, when you're a white person, you're not surrounded by those images. And I just think it would be so great for kids, but I could never let a little girl there without the ads gone, because the ads are just here's how you hit on your secretary, or like but yeah, it's called Pterogenesis, and I think you would love it. Like I think it's
Sounds
very
awesome.
ADHD friendly.
Yeah. I've recently been de-stressing through The Sims 4, which
Oh,
has done so much intentional work and hiring diverse people behind the scenes to help create increased diversity in the game itself. And so it's a really cool game for that, and really good with like ADHD and
I
checking out,
really
getting high
respect
and
them for
checking
that.
out and playing Sims for a while. But yeah, but the second thing I was going to say is that was like a great transition to our new segment, which is Politics Nerds at Church, where we're talking about the federal workers and stuff. And I think one thing I want to say about that is like a lot what you can do, listeners, and I'm very curious what Emily and Susanna would add to this too, but is the federal stuff is a shit show, we know, but a lot of state governments and local governments, city governments are trying to pass resolutions to increase um, aid to federal workers who are being laid off, to do hiring incentives, things like that. Uh, and so checking in with your like local communities on that and your state government on that and trying to work on that is a cool way you can add relief. But also like I've been hearing a lot of people uh, just hosting meals for, and a lot of churches and stuff hosting meals for people who are being laid off and all that, or having friends over who are federal workers and just checking in and stuff. So there's a lot of like local tangible things that you can do to help. Uh, of all the many problems, of course, this is one and a few ways you can think about or approach it, hopefully.
And also, the pushback is actually working. It's not across the board and everything. And the courts are doing better due diligence than I anticipated them doing. But the pushback actually works, both in terms of Republican pushback towards Republicans about, like right now, this week, they're anticipating a government shutdown, trying to avoid a government shutdown for budget stuff. And so it's even more important to make sure that, right, you can call your legislators and make sure they're not cutting the budget, especially for Medicaid and SNAP benefits, which now all of the federal workers need, right? Um, but also to like the pushback is working, and I think it is really easy to get lost in the sauce of everything that they are doing because there is too much that they are doing, and they are doing that on purpose. But like, it is working. The pushback is working, and I think that that matters a lot in terms of like what is going on right now, and your periodic reminder that if you write a script, all your script has to say is, "Hi, I'm so and so." If you're a pastor or if you have a fancy title, please use that and your full name, your full professional name. "And I am a constituent of yours in whatever. And I think this is wrong." If you're a person of faith, say, "And my faith as a Christian, Lutheran, pastor, layperson, youth director states that it is important to care for everyone. That the ways that we act matter. That the diversity and inclusion and equity for our government and our workforce makes us better, that God created us diversely." Right? You can write a whole script, right? But if you call after hours, you can just leave a message and you don't have to talk to anybody.
I'm going to pipe in and say that the union that tracks things that have to do with federal workers is the American Federation of Government Employees. And they also work with the AFL-CIO and SEIU, which, like, honestly, like, the backs. Like, if I were to be honest, I would say these unions hate each other, which they do. They tend to not like each other. They really, really don't. But they're united on this front. So like, it's like any group. Like the bigwigs, they tend not to get along. But the individual labor activists do. So like, if you go to afge.org, that will has maps, that has take action things, that allows you to find your local labor people. So if you're really interested in doing work for government employees in your state, then you can go to that website and you can get the information of that local union and ask them to keep you informed about protests they're doing or letter writing campaigns they're doing. That website also does, I should take my own advice and write a letter as the daughter of a government employee who was raised on that. And they have a section there on how to submit a letter to the editor of your local papers, because Trump is very, very, very concerned about the media. So having letters to the editor is also a really important part of grassroots campaigns. So like, and you can find your local papers. They have a list there and what email address you email and all of that. So if we were to highlight an action organization right now, I would probably say the Federal Government Employees Union.
Love it. Thank you.
What is the, Susanna, remind me what the address, what the link is that you said, and I'll type it in the.
I will pop it in there. It is afge.org. I will find some of their organizing resources and pop it in there. They have a take action page, and I really love is that if you go to the take action page, it gives a notice right there on the page. It says this information should not be downloaded using government equipment, read during duty time, or sent to others using government equipment because it suggests action to be taken in support of or against legislation. Do not use your government email address or government phone in contacting a member of Congress. Like, it's like,
Very
try
Yeah.
clever.
like it even in its actions, it's trying to protect government employees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just popped it in the comments
Okay.
Thank
because I'm
you.
kind of competent. Anyway, yes, definitely check that out. Learn some information and do something.
Hmm.
Write an email, write a letter, call a person.
Yeah.
You can do this, and your voice is making a difference.
And even more so, we can do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Power and collective and community. So yeah, that's our brief kind of politic nerds at church segment we're doing. I shouldn't say brief because knowing us, some of these can be long. But basically, during these times, we just, especially with Susanna's amazing wisdom on this, but between Emily, myself, and Susanna, all the resources we are coming across, and just finding ways to talk about small action items you can take, and talking about what's going on in the world and making sense of it.
Yep.
But let's go back to a nostalgia says simpler time, even though it wasn't necessarily, of 1999, July of
It felt simpler.
1999. Yeah. Well, because we were kids, and part of it.
Yes. 100%.
Or yeah, teens. So the movie The Blair Witch Project came out in July of 1999. It was directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. And 99 was, just think of how just feel the nostalgia in your heart if you are also a 90s kid of all these
I
movies that
can't
came
wait.
out this
I'm
year.
ready. I'm ready.
Toy Story 2,
Yes.
The The Matrix, Disney's Tarzan, the anime one, The World Is Not Enough, James Bond movie, American Beauty, October Sky, 10 Things I Hate About You, Never Been Kissed, Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me,
I saw that
Run
with my
Lola
youth group, and
Run.
my youth director sat next to me the entire time going, "This is not funny. This is not funny."
For which one? Austin Powers?
Austin Powers.
I love it. I remember you telling me that story in the podcast before too.
Yep.
Wild Wild West, American Pie, Muppets from Space, and The Adventures of Elmo and Grouchland. Drop Dead Gorgeous, Mystery Alaska. Those are two of Brian's and my favorite films. Dogma, Galaxy Quest, and Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, which we covered in season 6.
13. I saw
Big year.
13. I'm so proud of myself.
And in the more horror realm and horror adjacent realm, we have The Mummy, which we covered in season 1, the 90s one with Brendan Fraser. The Sixth Sense, which we covered in season 5 with Rich Holloway. Sleepy Hollow, which was the season 5 movie commentary. Cruel Intentions. We need to do like a sapphic season and do Cruel Intentions.
Oh, for sure.
The Rage, Carrie 2. Existence, a Cronenberg film. Idle Hands, one of my favorite horror comedies. Summer of Sam, Eyes Wide Shut, Lake Placid, The Haunting, Deep Blue Sea, The Astronaut's Wife, Stigmata, Bats, House on Haunted Hill, The Messenger, The Green Mile. So much.
I think I've seen 3 or 4 of those, but not a ton.
I love it. So, the question everyone's been waiting for. When was the first time you have seen this movie?
Okay, so I heard about this movie when it first came out, but did not see it at that time. And I did not know if it was something that had actually happened or if it wasn't. And I was kind of like led to believe on the side of this is something that actually happened. And nobody ever really corrected that. And I got an inkling before we watched it that this is probably like a mockumentary type of situation because I had heard of those by now. Um but the first time ultimately that I watched it was for this episode.
Really? I thought you had seen this one before.
No, I picked this one
I know you did.
because I had heard of it back then and it had like captured my like curiosity, but I was not in a place in whatever year to watch a movie about real witches in real forests, which is what I thought it was. So when we were coming up
Yeah,
with which movies, I was like, I know which movie. This is my time to like watch all the ones that I like have heard about and never watched because
love it.
I'm just not in the right place for it. Yeah. What about you?
I saw this in theaters the summer it came out. I don't remember if I saw it like close to opening, but I'm pretty sure I did. But it is interesting what you say about whether or not it was real and questions about that, because we're definitely going to get into that in our behind the scenes. But before that, Susanna, when was the first time you've seen this one?
Um, it was a long time ago. It was probably the early aughts. Um,
Nice.
it was like, let's see, 99. 99, I think I had just gotten out of college. Because I'm very old. And,
Very old.
I'm so old. I'm your elder. You listen to Mike.
Ma'am,
But,
none of us are 7 years
like,
old. That's
here's
for
the thing.
adults, I
Like,
think.
horror movies would either freak me out and I turned them off or I fell asleep. So, I think on this one I fell asleep, so I remembered
That
bits
tracks.
and pieces of it. I remembered the end of it. I remembered being like, "What's he looking at?" I remember being like, the
Yeah, what
map,
was he looking at?
and like, I remember that being really scary and not knowing why. I probably was drunk because it was my 20s.
Yeah.
So it was I think it was a drunken fall asleep late night thing with friends.
It's yeah. I feel like that's the best way for this movie to be watched, or maybe in theaters if you really want to go out and see it when it came out. But like beyond that, there's not much to the movie. Um, but before we get into that, some behind the scenes. So I just want to say, Emily, that the question of whether or not this was a real film or not was something that was an intentional part of the marketing campaign, and which led to a whole variety of drama that has since come out in the years since. So last year was the 25th anniversary of this movie, which makes me feel like an elder. Um, but the inspiration was by the co-directors slash kind of writers, Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. They realized as friends and stuff, and as they're talking, it's like we love horror movies, but the real life stuff that's like the ghost hunting TV shows and all that stuff is even scarier to us because it's like real life. So they were like, what if we were to make our own documentary movie that and like blend it with a horror movie and try to do that. This Some people think of this as the first found footage film. It is not. There are many before then, including Cannibal Holocaust, which is the first one to really break it. But Blair Witch is the found footage film that basically reintroduced it to mainstream audiences and bringing new people to it. And so, like, Paranormal Activity is a big one that kind of followed in this. Uh, Cloverfield is another one. So, became like a big thing. But anyway, back to Daniel and Eduardo, is they created a production company called Haxon Films, which is related to the very first movie we covered this season, Haxor.
Yeah, I recognized it. I was so excited.
Yay!
It's like Jackson. I know that one.
And so that was a production company that they started all this under. And they initially thought that it would be like a made for TV film that would just air on TV as like on like the Sci-Fi or Discovery Channel or something. Um, and then they decided kind of on a whim to submit it to Sundance. It received huge acclaim. It was picked up for wide release by Lionsgate and then hit theaters. So, and was a runaway success. It was made on a, I think it was like such a small budget. I'm trying to, okay. So the film was filmed on like a $25,000 budget, which is cheap. And then with marketing and stuff and all that, the budget ended up about 500, somewhere between 500 and 750,000, which is still very cheap for a movie. Most movies,
Yeah.
even at that time, are in the millions for a budget. Uh, like 10, 12, 15 million was a
Hmm.
common movie budget. And so the movie made hundreds of millions in a box office return, over 250 million box office, and since then has spawned an entire franchise and all sorts of tie-in stuff, parodies, all that. Uh, so became a huge money-making machine for Lionsgate. So the found footage stuff. This entire movie was fake in a sense, as in what happened were Eduardo and Daniel hired three actors, put a casting call for three actors to play the main characters, but they had to be good at improv. There was no dialogue written.
Hmm.
And so they were basically told this, they were given like instructions on a piece of paper that were hidden in film canisters, as well as directions on where to go. And so over 8 to 10 days, they all the actors shot the footage themselves and starred in it and improvised according to whatever the writers wanted for that particular day for the to be the subject of it. In addition to that, the they were inspired by military training to to basically use this 8 to 10 days of filming as a way to give the three actors very little sleep, a lot of high energy, walking far, long distances, and then also at night, like intentionally, like with the actors' knowledge and consent. So not, it wasn't anything like they were trying to trick the actors, but basically like do weird noises and stuff at night and stuff for them to react, but also meaning that they got very little sleep for those 10 days. So they're basically
Hmm.
intentionally trying to create this weird like exhaustion for the actors to make it more authentic of what people would actually be like. So kind of like a form of method acting, if you would say. Um, so yeah, that's what happened. There was none of it was real as in stuff that there's no such thing as the Blair Witch. That was all made up for the movie. Um, Burkittsville, Maryland is a real place though. But before I get into some of that, as a Maryland local, I have thoughts. But I wonder if you do too, Susanna. There, I have a lot of thoughts about the setting of this movie. But anyway, when they released this movie, though, the actors were forbidden from giving interviews for, I think it was like a minimum of 6 months to a year after the film was made. And from acting in anything else, they had to basically pretend to be dead and their IMDb page and stuff even said missing. Like the studio went all out as part of its marketing of making this appear as if it was a real movie.
Did they at least compensate them for all of that time of pretending not to
We'll
exist?
get there. We'll get there.
Oh no. That
There's
means no.
drama.
That means
Um,
no.
yeah. I mean, studios and capitalism are gonna studio, but but so like people could get like it you could kind of tell like it was a marketing stunt, but that nevertheless kind of like the original War of the Worlds radio broadcast. There was enough people who were like, "Oh my gosh, this is real." And to even bring it into that, they filmed another fake documentary. If you remember them mentioning in the movie, one of the characters interviewed is like, "Oh yeah, I saw a documentary about it on like Discovery Channel or something." And so as part of the movie, they created a fake documentary with people being interviewed who are historians and police officers to basically look like one of those ghosts, real ghosts of Frederick County kind of TV show that was all about the Blair Witch, and it was totally made up to tie in with the movie, but aired on like TV as if it were real and stuff to like add
Oh
to the
wow.
illusion. And it was just, and so like it became pretty. I mean, it was kind of like the best hid secret. Like it wasn't the most open secret. Like people knew it was. There's enough clues that if you thought about it critically, you're like, yeah, this isn't real. And I think most of the industry was like, yeah, this isn't real. But like the kind of like popular response was like, question, is this real or not?
Yeah.
The pop culture
Hello.
response.
My name's
Yeah. Um, so you mentioned the actors and compensation.
hmm
Uh, I will link this in the show notes. It's also in the document if you want to put it in the Facebook comments or whatever. But there's this there for the 25th anniversary, uh, there were a round of interviews with the original actors of the film, and basically the three of them, all said that they were kind of treated horribly after, with most of them living in like poverty or working many jobs within that first year after the film because they couldn't do anything in public. Meanwhile, the studio's getting millions of dollars, and they
Right.
only got paid the compensation for the filming itself, as opposed to like starring stuff. And like it was shot on a budget of like around $50,000, including what they paid the actors to be in the movie.
Divided by three just among the actors. That is not enough.
Yes. And so they eventually started to get some money from it, but it was a small amount. And part of it is because of the contract. In order for the studio to pull off this stunt about them being dead or whatever, and not and to make it seem like they are real people, they require the contract for the three actors said that they had to use their real names and identities and in the film. So Heather, Michael, and Joshua are the real names of the three actors. And
Mhm.
it also gave the studio rights to like reproduce their likeness and stuff for their like fake mockumentaries. But that also meant that there would be no further compensation or royalties for that. So the studio basically got carte blanche to use them and their acting and these stories for perpetuity without any kind of ongoing support or royalties for the actors. And so in the early 2000s, the three actors did a lawsuit. They got each of them received a $300,000 settlement, which is still not much money, given the fact that this movie and the franchise as a whole has made hundreds of millions of dollars. Um, and so for the 25th anniversary, they're all just going on record basically talking about just the complicated legacy. Like they loved being in the film, they loved the press it got, they love its place in a horror kind of cinema and Hall of Fame and all that. And also they've just were really harmed by the process in the studio being awful.
Yeah, they
Um,
couldn't even do like the red carpet stuff. They couldn't do any of
yeah,
the
exactly.
fun celebrity stuff with it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So, and I mean, they eventually made it onto the talk show circuit eventually, but like by then the film's popularity was waning and stuff. So it's like it just was,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's all of the behind the scenes drama. I do want to quick mention my thoughts as a Marylander for this film, which is when I saw it for the first time, I was like, oh yeah, maybe the Blair Witch is real or something. And then I lived in Frederick County for most of my childhood where this film is set. Burkittsville is like on the southwestern side of the county. And that's where this movie was filmed in and around at Burkittsville and Seneca State Park, all in Maryland. And when I recognized some of what was happening and the setting in the theaters, I was like, this doesn't make sense if this was real. There's no way this can be real because Seneca State Park is 10 square miles.
You can't put that
How
in
can
there.
they be lost for weeks or for like over a week in 10 square miles? It
Mm,
makes no. damn sense. It's not this massive wilderness woods. And they're really like if you go
I was
north into
thinking
like
that, and
Gambril's
I don't
area,
even know how big Seneca Falls is. And I was like, how are they still lost?
right?
Y'all, look
Like
at the sun.
you can hear it's one of those parks that you can hear the major highway from almost the entirety of the park as it's passing.
Yeah,
It's like
I
just
never
walk in
thought it
that
was real.
direction. Right?
I never thought it was real. Mostly because I'd never heard of Blair Witch, and I've lived in
Right?
Maryland since I was like 6, I guess. And Maryland is like, it's a small state, and people are right when they say it's like a mini America. It has everything but a desert. It has lakes, it
Yeah.
has beaches, it has plains, it has farmland, it has urban, it has mountains. But it is small, and it's one of those states that you wouldn't think of. Like when you think of a state that's really proud of its traditions and legends, you think of something like
Mm,
Texas. But like honestly, like I may be pushing it here, but Maryland could give them a run for their money. Like we know all our shit
probably though,
about like
honestly.
like
Between
I
Old Bay.
I was
and we
gonna
have some
say,
weird
I've seen the
stuff.
flag everywhere.
Like we love our flag. We love our flag, and we the Old Bay stuff, but also like we do weird stuff. Like
Yeah.
I did not know that it wasn't like a national thing for all the high schoolers in the state to go to the nearest pile of water on
Yeah.
senior week. Like
Yeah,
literally
having a senior week as part of the state.
the whole
That's just a
state, and the
Maryland
whole
thing.
state's fine with it. 17 and 18 year
Yeah.
olds all leave for an entire week and go to the beach.
At Ocean
Every
City.
single one. Every single one. I thought
Yep.
that was just like an American culture thing, but it's not. Some people don't
That's
do jack
Maryland.
for their senior week. And like we were
Right.
like children going away for a week on our own. Like,
Unless you had parents like mine, in which case you were not allowed. But still, it was the thing. Like all of my friends went.
right? Like we do weird stuff and everybody knows
Yeah.
it, and we
But
think it's like, so
and
like it's
like
the idea of like a Maryland legend that I didn't know that
right,
everybody knew
like
about was like,
everybody knows about Edgar Allan Poe in Baltimore. Everybody knows about the ghosts of Annapolis. Like there are the Maryland legends are known throughout the state.
Harper's
The
Ferry.
ghost of Antietam, the ghost of
Mhm.
Harper's Ferry. Like we know it. We would have known about Burkittsville ghosts if it was a legit
I
thing.
didn't know jack shit about Burkittsville. What the fuck is Burkittsville? I've never heard of Burkittsville before. So like, I was like, I've never even heard of Burkittsville. I don't even know if that's real. Like, I just
Yeah,
feel like I would have known. Like, pick a different state, maybe. Like,
right. Yeah, yeah, I love it. So this leads me to a funny bit of trivia from behind the scenes. This is the last thing I'll say before I have a quick real life church horror story like this movie that I want to share too. But so when they were filming the town interview scenes, that was really on the streets of Burkittsville, and the directors, to add to the authenticity, had a few plants in there, as in like people planted to say things about the Blair Witch, and that's where most of the lore about the Blair Witch comes from those interviews. But also, they encouraged the actors to go up to just anybody they saw on the street, knowing many of them would not be plants, and just see what people would naturally say about the Blair Witch. And some of the interviews are in the film are actually just people from Burkittsville, just like, oh yeah, I heard that, and just making shit up. Love it.
That's fantastic.
that was
And
another
it,
thing that I thought was
yeah,
really weird is that like witches, like I don't know if it's because I'm East Coast and so like I've heard of Salem and everything, or maybe because
yeah.
the Crucible is part of our like required like
It's funny you
education
say
reading.
that. Yeah.
But like we don't have a bad opinion of witches. Like the
Right?
East Coast doesn't have a bad opinion of witches. There are people here that proudly call themselves witches. When we think of witches, we think of people burned at the stake or like group think, hullabaloo, crucible, like Salem type of stuff. Like the idea of like there's a witch who lives in the wood. That's like we're just barely southern, but we're not that southern. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not It's
Shots
not a thing. Like
fired.
when like this isn't the state to set up a legend about an evil witch in the woods. Like any
Right?
more
And
than
that
like
was,
Massachusetts would be. Like go pick a
yeah.
different state.
Yeah, that's the weird thing too. Like, it's funny you mentioned that. Both the Salem witch trials and the Crucible, because both of those were cited by the directors as their inspiration for the backstory of the Blair Witch, is that she was killed by exposure after being cast out of the town of Blair, which Burkittsville was always called Burkittsville. It was never called Blair. So just all sorts of made up shit for this movie. But just so like them intentionally trying to tie it into the real life Salem witch trials, and then the Crucible, of course, based on it, uh, for better or worse. And I don't honestly don't know where it is on this. Um, the film's just kind of a mess, but the genre of mockumentary is a genre where they form do a fake documentary that's usually comedic. The version that is used in horror and science fiction and drama and stuff is usually called found footage, with the because basically the backstory of it is, oh, we found these tapes and
Hmm.
we're just showing you what the tapes are. So that's why it's called found footage. These tapes that were recorded by of real life events. And so it's a thing. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I was like the first one, the first like fake documentary, basically, that I saw was at a film festival in my town when I was in high school, I think. And it was this one that was like a documentary, purporting to be a documentary about the 1%. And they had all these interviews and stuff. And then after it was over, they played the like spoofs and the like back behind the scenes parts of them like coaching the actors to sound more rich and oblivious and all of those things. And so that's what I think of when I think of like a mockumentary, and like yeah, it's just interesting to think about like that, and then also think about things like, Columbine or Fahrenheit 451, not 451, Fahrenheit 9/11. Um and like where I mean, this gets into a whole other like genre classification thing because you can pull in memoirs versus autobiography, right? Like, how do you
mhm.
classify things? How do you understand things? How much of it is factual? How much of it needs to be factual to be true? Does any of it? But how do you convey what is factual while also acknowledging that it doesn't have to be factual to be true?
I love it. I was gonna save that discussion for a deep dive, but you just summed it up perfectly. That's what this film raises up for.
Yeah.
Well, this genre, I will say, raises up is questions of what even is truth and what do we consider reliable sources, all those
Yep.
things, which is important conversations in this day and age.
So important.
So, I have a real quick real life church horror story, which I think I might have mentioned on the podcast before once with Ben Monroe, is the church I was at in Castro Valley when I lived out in California. It was called Faith Lutheran Church of Castro Valley. Really cool church, in many ways. And they had a really creative, and I'm using creative like authentically, like stunningly creative team for their worship and arts and kind of the design of like pyramids and decorations around the sanctuary and stuff like that. Very well done year round. Um, for Lent though, they had they would hang up on the pillars around the church these sticks that were kind of tied together briefly, like tied together lightly, held together lightly with like a purple fabric, and they'd just be hung on the pillars, bare sticks. And I swear to God, if I did not think I was in the Blair Witch every single time I would walk into that sanctuary with those sticks, they looked so much like the weird little stick people. And so I was like, I hated being in the church at night. Anyway, churches at night with very
Oh,
few lights, and you're like one of the only people. It's always scary. Just something weird about dark spaces that are really large and you're kind of alone. It's scary.
mm-hmm.
Um, but then when you add like those Blair Witch stick figures with purple cloth all around the sanctuary. I'm like, oh dear Lord. As we're presently in Lent right now.
Right? I know. We
Hallelujah. I'm going to hell.
Oh my god, like I was not
scandalous.
that girl. I was the scandalous girl in the church, always, whether I wanted to be or not.
I
Like, so.
love causing a good scandal.
once your church has like branded you a slut because you dated, like then it's like, you know what?
No holds barred.
I don't have any reason to revere the building or the walls of this church anymore.
I will
So
see your slut and raise you. Total depravity.
I mean,
Really, Pastor? Do you have a story about your total depravity? No, no,
No.
nothing you want to share.
I mean, I I love this going on, but also um witnessing. And also last night I'm teaching a class on mystics at my church right now, Christian mystics, and like last night was the first class, and I was really anxious about how a certain thing I shared would be received in the class
Mm,
because I showed the beautiful illuminated manuscript, mystic manuscript that has a picture of the wound of Christ. Um, and I was using that to illustrate how mystics in the Christian tradition, many of them would use sexual and erotic language and imagery to describe encounters with God and also the deep longing and desire that God has for humanity and humanity has for
mhm,
God, all of that stuff. And the sacred union that happens between believer and God in a marriage like happy exchange of things. And so I was like, here is this. So I had to, before I showed the slide, I was like, I just need to say this is a PG-13 class. And I showed the slide, and um, online you can find it if you look up illuminated manuscript the the pure side of Christ, or you can look it up by what is known in the meme world of the side of Christosi, or the pierced ussy of Christ, because it is a very vulvific and
Mm-hmm.
vaginal, intentionally so, depiction of that. And all I've heard is positive feedback, so I guess I can be a little dirty and scandalous with church. I love to work at a church where they're cool with that.
I love that you work at a church where they're cool with that.
Yeah. And like, I mean, what are they gonna say? It's heretical. It's part of a 14th century.
Right, but that's the thing is like these days, the scandal is like the very, very old traditions of
mhm,
erotic experiences with Christ. And like, I don't know, in a lot of progressive high liturgy folks, right, give all this crap about Jesus is my boyfriend songs. And like, yes, I get it in a lot of respects. But also,
Right?
that's a
There's
mystic.
this weird, well, this will be a whole other side topic, and we're here to talk about Blair Witch, but just to say briefly, and we'll have to come back to this, because purity culture comes up a lot on this podcast, because it is a real life horror of the church.
Mm-hmm.
But I also find in progressive circles this weird sort of prudish pushback to sex stuff as well. Like they say it's like just the conservatives, but also it feels like no, we can't talk about certain things. And it's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and
anyway,
I think a lot of that is also connected to, at least in the ELCA, we don't want to offend the conservatives,
yes.
even
mhm.
though like we won the vote by 2/3, and then conservatives left. Who you
Who's left to offend?
right?
the queer people are left to offend, but we don't think about them. We just think about the
Yep.
conservatives. Um,
Well,
Yeah.
apparently we
And the
can't get
allies.
offended.
right.
We can't get
And the
offended. We
allies.
do too much shenanigans.
But and the allies that like actually show up. Susanna and I just finished watching the latest season of Love is Blind.
And you finish it. Oh, Minneapolis. Oh, Midwestern culture.
But wait, do you need to not have spoilers then, Pace?
Yeah, probably no spoilers. I want to see what happens.
Okay. I need you to finish it.
Uh-huh.
I need you to finish it before the next thing we
Okay,
record with Susanna.
no spoilers. I won't
Because there
spoil.
is some big stuff with what we're talking about.
I love
In
it.
the beginning, I said, when you asked me, how's it going? I said, so far, the internet thinks it's boring because the internet doesn't realize that so far it's going exactly like those of us from the East Coast would expect a show in the Midwest to be. Like, it's that same
Hmm.
situation, and it feels exactly the same to me. And this is before I watched the whole thing, and I was like, I only watched a couple of the pods thing. Everybody's being so nice and so boring and not talking about their actual issues. They're not talking about their issues, and so it's going to
Right.
get all kinds of dramatic later. Remember when I told you that? Absolutely
Uh-huh.
happened. And I was
Uh-huh.
telling Emily, this is my experience as an East Coaster in the Midwest. It was like East Coast,
Yes.
yeah, they're mean as fuck. Okay, they're mean. They're like, what the hell is wrong with you? You do not know how you're changing that tire. That tire that you're changing is bullshit. Oh my god, honey, let me do that
Uh-huh.
for you before you hurt yourself. They're mean, but they're nice, right? Like,
Right?
like
It's a
they're
nice
gonna change
meanness.
the tire for you, and they're gonna tell you off while they do it, right? But the Midwest, and it's just, I experienced it a whole lot of people being super, 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 super nice,
Hmm.
and then as soon as I turned my back, the knife just was like in my back, so I was waiting for the knife, and
Uh-huh.
I really feel that
Uh-huh.
Love Is Blind is like that. It's people who don't talk about their issues. They don't really talk about their issues. They got issues, but they pretend like they don't have issues. And
Hmm.
then when the issues blow up, everybody's like, I didn't know about my issues. Now, at the same time, I also feel like the internet was a lot of like, why didn't these women say more blatantly what they didn't like? And I said, okay, it is a common experience of particularly women, that feeling when you don't tell somebody's secret, you don't tell somebody's fucked upness because you want to protect their reputation because you've been socialized to protect men's secrets.
Yes.
Even when it's like, and I think that that happened a lot behind the
Hmm.
scenes, behind the
Hmm.
cameras, and it's pretty evident.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
impulse. Um, the socialized impulse, I think. And I often say this, so I can't wait to finish Love is Blind Minneapolis because I'm becoming more and more notorious out here in Minneapolis, for better or worse, as an East Coast Lutheran in origin. And really, really, truly, and I've said this to so many people out here, and they're always shocked, but then they think about it and they're like, oh, that makes sense, which is as a kid growing up with my mom as a pastor, always being a huge, like, largely involved in the church and not just like in my local congregation, but like in being very aware of what's happening in church wide and on the
Mhm.
synodical level and stuff like that as a kid and seeing some of the behind the scenes there. I never understood it. And then I moved to the Midwest and I'm like, oh, Lutheran polity makes so much sense.
Mm.
As an East Coaster, it was so weird. Like, why are these people acting this way? And then I move out here, I'm like, oh, it was like the only place that still like very prominently bears the mark of Midwestern culture is ELCA polity, even in congregations out east.
Mhm.
So,
It's true.
well, from the horror of that to the horror of witches in Burkittsville, Maryland. Um, do you have a one sentence summary for this movie?
I do. Lessons in how not to go hiking.
Right? If we could do this over
I'm
again,
from
I
Colorado,
totally,
like from the start. Why are you
yeah,
going to go hike in the woods for multiple days? Why are you wearing jeans?
right? And such heavy packs for only like a
How
week.
the fuck did you not run out of food if you thought you were going to be there for 2 nights?
It just, yeah,
Did you bring iodine? Your water doesn't look orange.
yes. I kind of, in retrospect, I wish we had thought of like maybe inviting a park ranger to be a guest for this episode because we
We
talked
totally could
about
have. I know
federal
one.
employees. But yeah, me too. But also because of all the do not do this if you go into a state
Right.
or national park.
Yeah. If you need tips, you can see Nerds at Church's Lent one um episode from our third season, I believe,
Love it.
where we
Love it.
have Andrew Walker on to talk about survival in the wilderness.
Um, yeah, mine. So take a shot if you are team, whichever you want, who has the longest side. Take a shot because mine is weirdly longer than Emily's, which is 90 minutes of woods and 30 seconds of witch. Question mark? Do you have one, Susanna?
If Clerks director Kevin Smith did a movie about his nightmares, this would be it.
Ooh, I like that.
It had a very 90s Clerks kind of
It
vibe,
did.
but horror. Like if
I love it.
Clerks was a horror film instead of a,
So,
you know what I mean? Like if Kevin Smith was like having a nightmare horror and he did a movie, it would be this. Like
yeah.
it feels very like he is the comedy of the
Except
90s.
there'd be
Like
a
this
lot more
is the
pot.
horror.
But beyond that, yes.
You know?
They
There'd be a lot more pot, but otherwise, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just went the
Kevin
alcohol route.
Kevin Smith though, like has legit horror movies, and I'm loving this about a lot of actors and directors who got their start in comedy. Jordan Peele is another one who then take this horror route in their later years. So Kevin Smith's been putting out a lot of horror stuff lately, including like stuff
Mm.
like Tusk. But he has this movie that I really, really want to cover on the podcast, which is called Red State, and it is a horror movie about a church who believes it is the end times because they are, even though it's not, or maybe it is, like it's a horror movie, so is it or is it not? Who knows? But the church definitely thinks that's the end times, and so and it's this very conservative, red, far right church, and what they do to unsuspecting people as they are passing by the church, as the church is preparing for the end times and thinking that heathens need to be saved or killed and that kind of stuff. Really good movie, really theological movie. So
Interesting.
yeah, we'll cover that sometime. And also his other movie, Dogma, is another good theological one we should cover. But right,
So good.
right.
I love Dogma.
Me too, me too. Well,
So good.
uh-huh. And Alanis Morissette is God.
Alanis Morissette is
Um,
God. It was really perfect, yeah.
It's kind of ironic. I mean, no,
But
it's not.
like the
That's
him as
about
a
as
priest,
ironic a definition as in her movie, but yes.
woo!
Or in her song, I mean.
Indeed.
Uh, well, let us roll through the film. Why don't you start us off, Emily?
I would love to, Pace. Was video really this grainy in 1994? And I'm just not remembering. But then it's also 1999 that this came out. I didn't realize that in the thing, but they were saying it was in 1994. Was it really
I
this
think
bad?
I think they're saying it was 96, if I remember correctly. Maybe it was 94.
Whatever. In the 90s, was video really this bad?
Home. So this was filmed not on professional film cameras
They
of
had the
productions.
DAT.
Yes, they were filming on slightly above average film, like home video cameras. And I think some graininess and texture was added to it to make it even more like home video stuff.
Hmm.
And like some things were like changed to black and white and stuff to make it
Yeah, the
more
black and white,
whatever.
I was like, this to make it serious? Um,
But I think they're oversaturating it to make it look like these are VHS tapes and these have
yeah,
not been edited in post-production at all. We're just displaying what really happened
which we know is
by
wrong.
editing it in post-production to make it look like it wasn't.
Yeah. Um, Also, it felt so scripted.
Yeah.
Like, get better improv actors, I guess, or something. But like, it felt
It,
really scripted. But if they had like a thing that they're like, you have to be like this.
yeah. I feel like that's what it was. It's like they were told to improv out these like ridiculous scenarios. And if you ever watch even like really good improv troops like the Groundlings and stuff, some of the ridiculous scenarios, like you can tell
That
it's
they're like
improv.
struggling to
Yes.
ridiculous. Yeah.
And so I feel like that was part of it here. But there are also some scenes I will say did feel a little authentic and well and conversational. Like the interviews felt very like real, and I'm
Mhm.
glad they kind of started off that way to give that air of we are interviewing people
Yeah.
and we're asking questions and we're kind of nervous and they're nervous and that.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
also there was a woman in charge of a bunch of men, and we'll get into that in the
yes,
deep dive.
it goes about as well as it always does in horror, which is to say, not well, and would have went better if they just listened to the woman all along,
Mhm.
probably. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I for me this movie is always a little bit nostalgic because I saw it as a kid in theaters in summer, like just memories of 90s summers, and also living in Frederick County. I wasn't living in Frederick County when the movie came out. By then I was in Howard County, but I had lived in Frederick County for most of my childhood up until that point. So it just is like this is very familiar to me. This is what
Mhm.
Maryland looks like. These are how Maryland people talk, except for the three actors playing. But like the people interviewed in the town, it was just very Marylandy. Um,
Marylandy. I love it.
yes.
Although I didn't
You
hear
could,
very many Huns, if any.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's close. That's more Baltimore culture.
Good to know. Good to know.
But I mean, I could definitely feel the Old Bay in the setting in Burkittsville itself, like in the early town shots and stuff. I was like, this is Old Bay right here. Um, I saw this movie when I was what, 13, about to turn 14, is that right? Yes. And so like part of my queer awakening in that prime area for that. And so I have to admit I had a crush on Michael when I first saw it, and like the shirtless scene where they're pointing out his patchy hair on his chest. I was like 13-year-old face was like, oh, why am I finding this shirtless man attractive? Um, and out of the two guys, he's the better one. Josh is a real asshole in this. That's not to say Michael isn't, but Josh is clearly the worst of the two.
Which
Um,
one's which? Is Josh the one that they like hire, or Michael?
Michael is the um
Or
has the
who
more babyish face,
okay.
who
Who
shorter
throws away
hair,
the map?
who throws away the map. Josh is the one
Gotcha.
who's always screaming and has long hair and is always yelling at Heather. And Heather is the one who is the leader. Um, they also come across what they call as a dead rat. To me, it looked very much like a dead possum. And this was definitely a scene that probably wasn't even like set up or anything. It was probably just them filming come across a rat, something that they find dead as they're just going throughout their filming for the day. And they're like, let's try to tie this into the movie. So like, is this the witch? Like, it's a dead animal in the forest. Where else do they fucking die if they live in the forest? What are you talking about? And then, right? And then Michael's like, it's probably God. I'm like, what? That's the weirdest way to say it died of
Oh,
natural
it goes
causes.
so
So
far
like
left
that whole scene is
space.
just the weirdest.
mean, like, I just like for context, like we say goes to a farm upstate in this family a lot for like if the milk is bad, but I feel guilty from poverty shame for throwing it away, then I ask Matt to take it to a farm upstate, and that's Matt's job is the distributor of things to go to the farm upstate. That's his job. That's what he
Oh,
does.
that
Yeah.
was my job in my marriage. That wasn't very fun though.
Or
Um,
Buff gets to do.
I had to euthanize our fish. That was
Oh
not
God.
fun.
Oh, that's like a
Um,
whole different thing.
oh yes. Uh, so I'll make sure that's in the content notes for your ear holes if you're listening to this on podcast. Uh, Also, I love this whole big issue about the map. Again, the entire park is 9 square miles.
And
And if you just follow the fucking river, which like that's another survival thing they should have done. If they concerned about going in circles, follow the fucking river.
Mhm.
Keep it in
Mhm.
sight at all time. You'll get to the end eventually.
Mhm.
Right?
Jesus Christ.
Also, you shouldn't be walking off trail that much. That's not good
Right?
for the environment.
Especially if you're untrained like this. Come on.
Yeah.
Um,
Leave no trace, people. They left
yes.
plenty of traces.
I also love the line when they are wondering if things like the stones and the weird stick figures hanging from trees, they're wondering what the origin of that is. And one of them is like, it's probably just some local redneck. And then the response is, no redneck is this creative. I'm like, have you seen gender reveal parties? Rednecks can be very creative,
It's
not in like good ways,
right.
but like in creative ways. In oh bless their heart ways. Oh bless their cis straight hearts. Um Also, I said this before, God Josh is a dick. Michael's cute, but also he's a dick too for throwing out the map. Uh I love this line hasn't aged well. This is America. Isn't that possible? Finally, like breaks down and just starts screaming, it's not the same log, it's not the same log. And just like the despair in her voice, like that sounded like that was very convincing for me. And then also the scene, her weird apology scene with the camera and the flashlight like right in her face, that was part of the
Mhm.
previews for the movie, and it's probably the most parodied scene of the movie.
Oh my gosh.
I think
So,
is really well done. It's so overdone
okay.
now that it's like not as effective, but when it was
Oh
first
yeah,
came out,
it
it was
was
like,
totally like not effective for me. But when we were watching it, I have to scroll back. Okay. Um, Also, how are her hairs and her nails so nice still? Like
right?
her nails were in such good shape. It doesn't make sense. But while we were watching, I sent Susanna and Pace in our like chat, this GIF of Kermit the Frog just like his legs swinging and he's like holding onto a bar like a teeny tiny mini Kermit the Frog. It was like me the whole movie waiting for the scene where she turns the camera on her face close up at night.
Yeah, see, that's
It's
that's
just
it.
like
That's
waiting for it because that is the iconic Blair Witch
yeah. I
Project.
mean, it's even the poster of the film. Yep.
Yeah.
Uh, I do want to say another behind the scenes fact that I found in my research for the movie is Heather said she based the character, even though she's like essentially playing herself, but she like based a lot of her portrayal um in this movie off of a director she knew who just always displayed this like confidence, even though like there's no way the director couldn't have known that shit was going to hell, but also like but that
Yeah.
very like aloof, like things are fine, I'm
Everything's
fine,
fine.
I'm
I'm
not
fine. You're fine.
qualified
We're all
for
fine.
this, but I'm fine, like that kind of like energy. And I think she does that very well in the
Yeah.
beginning. When it's
Elon Musk,
things are clearly
fine.
not fine. Yeah,
Everything's
exactly, exactly. We all know people like that, and they're 99% of the time white and men.
Hmm.
So I like that. Well, I guess we can get into our deep dive. Uh, I have one really quick fact checking thing, and then we have some things that we can get into a little bit
Okay.
longer, I think. But the fact checking thing is a religion fact checking thing, which is
Which is important for us.
yes. So they reference this part of the interview is not filmed or not shown in the movie, but apparently when they're talking to Mary Brown in the interview, she brought up the story of Esau. And so when they were talking, so when they encountered the pile of rocks in the woods, Heather was like, "Oh, do you remember that interview with Mary Brown? She was talking about the story of Esau. There's something about the pile of rocks. There's something about the pile of rocks." And since we don't have that part of the interview with Mary Brown, like I don't know what she's talking about. But my best guess is Genesis 31, 48 through 52, where it's talking about using a pile of rocks for a marker of a grave. But that's also not really from the story of Esau. So it's like
Yeah.
it's not really clear what they're referencing there.
Yeah,
So
I was when they said Esau, I was like I know it is part of Jewish tradition to pile rocks as markers for people who have died for a variety of like contexts and stuff. If you go to um I it was most poignant to me when I was in Budapest and going to different synagogues and like the Holocaust and World War II memorials
mm,
where it was very clearly like little rocks in the shoes along the bank where people were pushed off, all of that stuff. And so like that's a thing, but it's not a
mhm,
scary creepy thing. It's a
yeah,
Jewish thing. Like
yeah, and many cultures too bury
yeah.
with rocks and stuff. It's not,
Yeah, so I was like,
yeah.
that's not a scary thing, but okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, no clue what story she was referencing, what story Mary Brown was allegedly referencing. But
Hmm.
Esau, if you don't know your Bible well enough to remember this, or if you just want a reminder, it was one of the sons of Isaac along with Jacob, and Jacob stole his Esau's birthright by tricking his father, and it's a
With
really
the
weird
help of
story
his
in the
mother.
Bible. Well, yes, tricking slash with wink wink do I yeah all sorts of things going on in the story, but
Yeah.
it's one of those like the the Pentateuch, the first five books of the Bible, the Torah, have a lot of stories that, and even throughout much of the Tanakh has a lot of these stories about um where the least of the siblings somehow gets the greater thing. Like this happens with,
Yeah, it's supposed to be the oldest always gets the stuff, and it almost never is.
yeah, and Bible is full of these stories, like King David being the youngest brother, who the dad doesn't even think is being considered to be a king, and yet the prophet saying, um, "No, I know you have another son. That's the one I'm looking for," and like it just happens all the
Yep.
time.
Joseph.
Uh, it's a recurring thing. Joseph, yep. So, Seth being the sole living child of Adam and Eve, and somehow still being able to spawn people.
You know, details, details.
Okay, so beyond that, I know there's a lot to get into. We already,
Let's talk about gender.
yeah.
Like, and this is when we were talking about it, and like the directors are both men, right? Is it
Hmm.
surprising that their instruction would create a situation where the only woman, is the boss and director, and also is like overbearing, is
Hmm.
clearly not actually knowing stuff when she says she is. Um,
Hmm.
all of that stuff and like bossy, right? She is meant to
Yeah.
look bossy,
Hmm.
which is a very
Hmm.
gendered term in and of itself. And like, I was just like, that in and of itself turned me off from this movie
Yeah.
so much because it's purporting to be a real, right? Like, it's trying to be a documentary, it's a found film thing. And so like those particular dynamics are just so frustrating when it's like you're pretending like this is real life and you're exaggerating
Hmm.
harmful stereotypes and tropes.
Yeah. And I mean, true, there are real people out there like that, but like it's just this perpetuation of it and in ways that are so clearly contrived too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like it either. And it also still kind of falls into the trope though, if they just listen to like clearly on the one hand,
She
she
doesn't know.
is supposed to be shown as like incompetent. Like that's part of her character. She doesn't know what she's doing, and that's part of it. But also
But also,
the
she's
way
more
the
competent
men
than either
are
of them.
undermining her, which makes it
Hmm.
worse. Whereas if they had just listened to her, they probably wouldn't have gotten as lost as they did.
Right? They
But
definitely
their
would have still had the
undermining
fucking map.
escalated it. Yes.
Yeah.
So kind of like Alien, where if they just listened to fucking Sigourney Weaver, none of this would have happened.
Hmm.
Although she actually was competent and knew what she was doing.
True. Yeah.
Um,
It was just so. Ugh.
I want to get into justice and retribution because that's part of the backstory and that comes up a lot in the witch movies we talk about. And especially because this was intentionally inspired by The Crucible by Arthur Miller and the real life Salem witch trials, is the idea of a witch who is killed unjustly by the town. And then the horror the town experiences is the witch's revenge
Hmm.
without and but the revenge is also part of retribution slash maybe justice. And so it gets into that whole complicated thing, which happens a lot in witch narratives, of how much of what the town has experienced as horror is actually kind of deserved for,
Hmm.
or how much of it is justice, or how much of it is retribution that isn't necessarily justice. Like it's
Yeah.
it
What is
it brings
revenge?
up
What
those
is
questions without
consequences?
really answering them. But I don't think it has to answer them. I'm glad it's bringing up those kind of questions to think about.
Yeah. That was not the biggest part of the story for me, so I don't think I even realized that. I didn't follow very well what the
Yeah.
story was for the witch.
Yeah, that was all in the weird kind of interviews in the beginning. So if you weren't like, I've seen this so many times that like I can track it, but I it's hard to follow.
It's not that easy. Yeah, it was not that easy for me to track that part. Um, but yeah, I think it's the book I read, Galaxy, has an aspect of that, of like people deciding that you are a monster, and
Hmm.
then because they have decided, you act like, or like
Yeah. I
that
mean,
that
that's
not that exact thing, but like that dilemma, right? That
that's
you
the
might,
movie Wicked, basically. I mean, that's a
yeah.
plot of that movie. Speaking of, we all have access to it now, so maybe we might just have to find a way to throw it into the season somehow as a movie
Maybe
commentary or something. I don't know.
we're already planning to watch it as a movie commentary paste, didn't you know?
Oh, I thought we were going to do it as like a river review or something. I didn't realize it was going to be.
Oh, we could do that too, but we I mean, I was joking. We weren't really actually planning, but we had talked about incorporating it in this season. So
Yes, yes.
we
So
will some way.
I hope we can do it because it's a good one, especially because we've already done The Wiz and The Wizard of Oz. So it might be a good way to kind of uh put bookmarks on this season.
Yeah.
Uh oh, and then also the irony of justice retribution being a central part of the witch's character and then not giving the actors
Justice.
justice.
Right? That's when you had that, and then we were talking earlier. I was like, is that what you're talking about? Like, we already had that conversation in the background. But
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, for sure. And I talked about the documentary film
Yeah.
dynamic already.
Questions about truth. What's real? What the responsibility is to tell the truth, all of those things.
Mhm.
Well, there's so much lore here. Not much because we don't really ever directly see the witch.
It's true. It's just the
And
hearsay.
and you did ask what one of them, I can't remember which one of the guys was looking at as we were watching it.
Oh
And
yeah,
I
in the
rewatched it
house.
today to see if I could figure out what it was. And it's not shown. But
Yeah.
in behind the scenes, what it is that he's running away from is the director wearing long johns over his head. And so like the character knew it was like it wasn't actually scaring him, but like that was just like to get the shot, was to be
Yeah.
chased by the director. And so it's like, okay, interesting.
Yeah. That's yeah. The witch lore hearsay is the witch's body is covered in hair, which actually
Yeah.
fits with Suspiria.
Hmm.
I was like, actually,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know where that came from originally, but not the first time.
Hmm.
And then the children or babies screaming, it really sounded like kids or babies to me, at night. And then the stick people. I did not
Yeah.
include the piles of rocks under witch lore
Or the dead rat
or the dead rat.
slash
Correct.
possum.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. And witches were and the persecution of witches was part of the backstory here too. And also in addition to the children baby screaming is like the witch also kidnapped kids, it sounds like, as part of her backstory too. That's part of what they were talking about in interviews. So kids would just go missing from the town of Burkittsville. So
Naturally,
yeah.
that's what happens, and nobody ever thinks twice or brings it to national attention. Yeah,
Yeah.
that tracks.
And also but it's like it's very much like has the vibe of urban legend. Like we all have stories like that. Like, oh yeah, it's so and so went like my college, like apparently a whole um group of teens were like burned alive in one of the dorms according to the urban legend of the campus, but that never happened. Like that's just the stories people would tell. Um
Mhm.
like because that would totally have made the news, like you're saying. But Uh, that also gets to the kidnapping children, gets to the anti-Semitic origins of witches in not origins of witches in general, but like origins of the depiction of witches as we have them today that can't come from medieval Europe, fear mongering around Jewish people and saying Jewish people would kill babies for blood libel and stuff like that. And so Jewish people could be accused of witches, and they have very Semitic features and all that stuff. So all that kind of gets tied in gross ways when you just repeat those narratives without any sort of commentary or awareness of the origins.
Yeah, and I think there's also like anti-Romani
Yeah, for sure.
aspects to how witches are characterized and stealing children and all of that stuff too.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well,
I think that's what bothered me about the movie is that I just felt like it didn't have very much lore. It felt like
hmm
okay, I want to do a like I think it's cute, like the whole like oh the Crucible Salem really did it were you or are those just like the most famous stories and you were like latching yourself onto those because they have major points or were great literature and there's nothing here. Like there's nothing
hmm
here. It's like I
Yeah,
want to make I want to make a woods story and I want to make this like found footage thing. But I need to have a reason they're in the woods. Let's go with a
yeah,
witch. How about a witch? And then like and then at the end of the day like being like, "Oh yeah, it's like a revenge story." It's like it just feels like a go-go gadget arm reaching for an
yeah.
attempt to be something. I don't know. It just didn't have anything. What
Exactly,
like
yeah. And that's my issue with found footage films in general. Is like
mm,
there's nothing, they're so thin. And like it's
mm,
cool and also like it's a cool genre and when it's done well, and also it just most of the
Not
time
done
it's
well.
not done well. And this
Yeah.
is definitely one of those examples.
are you
And
talking
like
about the
the
found footage of this or Love is Blind? I'm just asking naturally, Fred.
yes, that too.
Because Love is Blind, you were talking and I was like, oh my god, everything Pace is saying is 100% reality dating TV. Like
Uh,
horror and dating, like it's just like blowing my mind right now. It's really slim. They make it about something really big, but it's not something big. It's
yeah,
like it's got
it's a
doesn't really
paper
have
thin
any
concept.
yeah, yeah. Like, is reality dating shows just found footage?
Yeah, a horror of a different kind,
I
Yeah.
mean, we
but
did
horror
watch
nonetheless.
we did watch Love Actually one time for our horror, the horror of the cisheads. So,
Yeah.
We call it cishet
Yep.
class. It helps us understand.
I like it. I
mhm.
need some more cis-tech class.
I'm just like, oh,
Because
we're gonna watch
I
Love Is
am just
Blind.
I am so lost right now in the cis-het world.
You have to watch. That's what I'm saying. Watch it, but
I
imagine
will.
yourself as as you are a PhD student with a deep
Yeah,
inquiring mind, like you're in a lab, like you're
that's how
Jane
I approach
Goodall,
it
like
too. Like I think more of like the metaphor of like an alien. I'm an alien sent to study this strange planet where people act in very strange ways that are different from my
perfect.
ways.
I love
That's
it.
perfect. That's yeah.
Also, you should take notes, jot down your notes in our shared chat
I
so we
shall.
can
I shall. I have so much horror I'm getting through with all my deliveries, but as soon as I get through that, I plan on diving deep
Okay.
into the world of sets. God help me. Um,
God save us all.
well, I guess we can get to rating this thing. Um, out of 10, what are we going to say?
The stick people.
Stick people.
Yeah, let's do that.
I think I have written down stick dolls in the GIF
Let's
that's bouncing on around on the screen.
I guess that means I need to go first.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like I
everyone's just looking at me. Um, I had the movie not become the cult classic pop cultural phenomena that it is and inspired so much beyond it, it would be rated lower. But I'm going to rate it six and a half.
Ooh,
And I think
that's a
Ooh.
stick person.
because it's solid, it's good-ish, and it has like a lasting legacy that has it's that continues to like unfold in various ways. Some cool, some not, all that stuff. So that's where I'd rate it. There aren't really any on-screen kills, but just probably the off-screen kill of Josh, just because he was getting on my nerves the whole fucking time.
Oh my God, so annoying. Um, I cannot go above a 4, and I kind of want to do 3, but I'll leave it at a 4 because it clearly captured something in my imagination without having ever seen it. But I can't get past the like, let's just do a caricature of a woman with power, and I, I just can't. Um, and I mean, Josh is like the only off-screen kill. If this is the only kill, on screen, off screen. I mean, maybe Michael's facade of being cool got killed.
Hmm.
I'll put Michael's cool facade.
I like it.
Well, I'm going to surprise both of you, and I'm going to give it a 5 because it did bring back found footage and make it cool again. It did make teenagers pick up their video camcorders. I think it kind of like I think there's a I think that there is a an I think that there is an argument to be made that it contributed to reality culture, even though it wasn't real. The idea of people filming what's happening around them and that being entertainment. So, like,
Yeah.
I feel like it contributed to that. Um, and I can't go any higher than 5. I'm almost at 4.5, but I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt because
Why?
I feel bad for the actors, and I think they did a good job with what they had. I feel like
Okay.
the
Okay. Okay.
actors did a really good job with what they had. Like, and they were actors, and then they
Agreed.
were robbed of so much. So because of their skill level, which I think was significant,
Mm-hmm.
and that they made camping in the woods with a video camera actually scary, which I think
Yeah.
is significant. And because I think the film like contributed to the concept of videotaping at a time when video camcorders were becoming affordable and people could actually
Hmm.
have them individually. And so I feel like this contributed in some way that I can't name, but some way contributed to
Mm.
the concept of videotaping your everyday life and video camcording being entertainment. Like, so I'll give
I
Hmm.
it
wonder
that.
how many. Yeah, I wonder how many like kids actually got into film
Probably
because
a good
they
number.
had that space to like
Right.
explore
Like,
what it
I
might be
am
like.
grateful that there weren't video cameras being carried around by young adults and teenagers before Blair Witch because nobody needs to see what I was up to.
I like it.
And I don't need that floating on the internet anymore.
I
So
like it.
like I feel like this is right around the time when video recording became like I guess because this is right around the time when a camcorder was affordable on some level
Yeah.
for the average person, and so people were wondering what they could do with this power that only directors in movies had had up until that point.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
I
this was
love
a
it.
creative example of what even though it wasn't real, it still was a creative example of something you could do and not have to be a
Yeah.
director. It was like
Mhm.
Yeah. And to
almost
be
like
made
a
by outsiders from the film world, like the film itself being like this kind of rags to riches story for the director, sadly not for the actors, but
yeah. And I mean
Yeah.
like, and I really can't say enough about like it did really scare people, and for like it was like, hey, we're gonna make this like horror story. We're gonna give you no money. You're barely gonna get paid,
yeah.
and we're gonna use really bad film equipment, and it needs to be a blockbuster. Like nobody
Yeah.
would pick
And
that
the
job.
fact that they were
Mhm.
all acting and doing all the filming themselves
Right.
too,
Yeah.
like that's
And
hard.
still made less than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that they were doing the filming themselves. I mean, it just that's actually a feat as an actor. Like I find them to be
Hmm.
really talented. So I can't go below a 5 because of that.
That's
You
fair.
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I'm trying to think of what would be a creative kill. Because it was just. I'm gonna say. I bet I'm gonna say Hollywood egos.
I like
I
it.
bet this killed a lot of Hollywood egos.
I like it.
All right.
Yeah.
People who are like, I need this $1 million to do this, and I need. I think it really showed what the average person could do. Maybe I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's awesome. I love it. And like I kind of two things tied into the legacy, which is one of the reasons I gave it 6.5 that you're talking, Susanna, reminded me of things I want to quick say, which is the found footage genre as a whole, like the legacy of this movie, bringing that to the spotlight, has created space for like the VHS series as an example of found footage films. And those are becoming increasingly diverse with
Mm,
small, queer, uh, Black, Latin X
yeah.
directors starting making these horror found footage horror movies that are being picked up by big studios and stuff like that and distributed
Mhm.
through things like the VHS series and stuff. So that's really cool. And also, part of the nostalgia for me is like you're saying, like the impact it had on my interest of just wanting to go outside with friends and explore the wilderness because of what kind of cool and scary things might be out there. Sure, the movie's fake, but what's to say the woods behind my friend's house doesn't have something we could discover? And so I remember many nights of that summer just exploring, and that uh, adds to it for me. Did you have any jump scares, Emily?
I don't think I did.
Yeah, there aren't really any jump scares in this,
Yeah.
weirdly.
There's
And the
like weird
parent,
shit that happens, but
yeah.
not jump scares. Yeah. I don't think I had any jump scares.
doesn't pass the HNAC test. And I don't think it's eligible. I'll say that right off the bat. And also, I want to talk about Heather briefly because she has this weird apology scene in there that makes it kind of feel like she's trying to make herself eligible for
Mm.
an HNAC redemption arc. But A, I don't think it's necessarily necessary, and B, she still supposedly dies anyway, so it doesn't pass the test for those
Yeah.
reasons. But I just think it's just that iconic scene of her saying, "I'm so sorry," and all that. That it's like I feel like it deserves at least a mention for the HNAC test.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's eligible for the HNAC test, and I feel like the producer director people fail the HNAC test
Yes, yes, that too.
because they're just shitty.
Uh, our next movie is TBD. We definitely gonna do Practical Magic with River at some point, but
But not the next one. Yeah.
not the next time. So I need to look at and discuss with Emily and Susanna which of the movies we're going to do next. It might be something like The Love Witch or The Covenant or something. We'll figure it out and it'll be on social media so you can be prepared for that.
Hmm. I vote the Love Witch.
Okay, then that's what we'll do. We'll do The Love Witch next.
Great. Oh, I should get off of that and back to our script. That's me. The Love Witch. Okay, that's it for our show. Our theme music was by Matt May, and our super witchy tech magic wild genius was Susanna Porter. Is and always
You'll get there.
was and always is Susanna Porter. Horror Nerds at Church releases seasonally with a live video on Tuesday evenings and audio on your favorite podcatchers on Thursdays. Please comment, rate, and subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Support us on Patreon and get access to exclusive movie commentary episodes, BooTube episodes, and more bonus content by going to patreon.com/horrornerdsatchurch. Starting at only $5 to sign up, it is way cheaper than appropriate hiking gear. Follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Horror Nerds at Church, and Blue Sky and Twitter at HNACPOD for all the latest updates about upcoming films, news, and other announcements. Until next time, let's just keep going. This is America.
I love it. Is that a witch? No, it's just God.